Before introducing Adrian Sargent, our speaker today for the topic relationship fundraising at the times of coronavirus, I would like to take a moment to talk about our attempts at ILSS to explore the domain of fundraising, which we realized is a huge pain point for a large number of social purpose organizations. We organized our inaugural fundraising conference early this year to, to discuss challenges and success stories of fundraising organizations in the sector. Over 200 leaders participated and 24 speakers shared their experiences covering a variety of topics. We have collated the key takeaways from the day-long event in an ebook, and I would like to take this opportunity to launch the FRC ebook today. You can download it from our website, indialeadersforsocialsector.com/FRC. We hope the contents of the ebook provide you with a flavor of FRC 2020, capturing the ideas, insights, and conversations that went on into making it a vibrant day of learning, sharing, and connecting. And as mentioned before, we will soon be launching capacity building programs for fundraising professionals. So do join us on our social media pages or watch our website for more information on these. For today's session, I'm honored to introduce Adrian Sargent to all of you. Adrian is the founder and co-director of the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. The mission of the Institute is to generate social science evidence to enrich the experience of philanthropy. Adrian was formerly the Hartstug Chair in Fundraising at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. He teaches fundraising at multiple schools and universities across the world, including in the US and Australia. In 2010, he was named to the prestigious nonprofit Times Power and Influence list. Adrian is joining us today from the UK, and in this session, he is going to explore the psychology of human relationships and its relevance to fundraising in the context of current times. We are so glad to have you with us today, Adrian.
That's very kind, thank you.
The format for today's webinar would be that Adrian would be presenting for around 30 minutes. After that, we'll be opening the floor for questions. Please post your questions in the Q&A window, and we'll take them up after Adrian's presentation. Thank you, and over to you, Adrian.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending this session on relationship fundraising. What I'm going to do in this session is aim to really address four objectives. One of the first things I want to talk about is obviously the coronavirus situation, which we're all going through and doing our best to survive right now. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of evidence on what we know about giving at a time of economic recession, just so we can kind of set the context for the presentation. I'm also going to share with you how you can be raising more money for your organization right now, just simply through digital channels, and how other organizations are doing that. And then looking out to the sort of medium and longer term, how we can build more meaningful and profitable relationships with supporters. And I'm going to show you some ideas that we've shown through our own experiments of increased giving between 50 and 200%. So broadly speaking, over the course of the next half an hour, that's where I'm headed. And as producers just said, I'm happy to take questions at the end of that session. So the starting point was to show you some evidence of how economic recessions impact on giving. Now, there really aren't very many countries around the world that have been tracking evidence on giving from individuals, corporates, foundations, and so on, over an extended period of time. And really, there's only one country that's been doing that in a robust and systematic way over the last 50 or 60 years. And that's a study conducted in the US every year called Giving USA. And what you're looking at here is a graph of how giving is grown over time. And you can see the kind of current dollar value of philanthropy clearly in that graph. The blue years are years of economic growth, and the green years are years of economic recession. And so the first thing that really kind of stands out is that giving is remarkably robust. At times of economic recession, generally in the past in the States, we've seen individuals and corporates continue the level of philanthropic support. Now, as you'd expect, there would be a limit to that. And so really the most significant economic event in recent times, which can give us anything close to a parallel with what we're experiencing currently, is the global crash of around 2008. And over in the right-hand side of the screen there, you can see that giving, for pretty much the first time here, took a bit of a hit in that year, as you would expect. And overall, giving fell by about 6% when that recession hit. What you're looking at in this graph is the impact across different forms of giving. And you can see that, as expected, individual giving is impacted. Giving by bequests, well, of course, if the economy is tanking and the value of things is beginning to tank, then of course the values of bequests will fall as well. But what's interesting here, I think, is the corporate giving figure. And you can see that, you know, there was quite a dramatic drop in that in the first year after the recession. So all of that is pretty gloomy. It becomes a little happier, though, when you set it in its historic context. So certainly for 2 years, giving took a bit of a hit after that 2007-8 recession. But after that, it began to recover, and actually began to recover reasonably quickly. So clearly there's going to be pain over the next 12 months, 18 months, maybe even 24 months. But the learning from other countries where we've tracked this kind of thing is that the pain that's experienced by our sector is not as big as the pain that is experienced by, say, the stock market. And it does recover. Giving is remarkably robust in that respect. So what does that translate to at an individual level? Well, I think there's a pattern that we can expect as we look out to the future now. The first is that if you're one of those organizations that is providing services direct into the community, the chances are you're seeing a spike in that need right now, because people need help right now. They need housing, they need medical care, they need food, they need the absolute basics of survival. And that's made harder by the coronavirus situation. So what we see at an organizational level is that for the organizations that are providing that care, you can often see, a little perversely perhaps, a big jump in emergency giving, because people will respond to emergency appeals to help others at the time that the crisis is unfolding. So in many organizations, it's not an immediate dip that you see, it's a spike as people give to emergency appeals. Beyond that, though, as you would expect, having seen the Giving USA data, we would expect that there would be a fall in giving to our organizations. And then eventually that begins to surge and pick up. And oftentimes that's led by corporates and major donors who are the first really to lead that resurgence of giving. And eventually that surge flattens out into what will be the new normal for organizations. So what I'm going to do at the first part of this presentation is to just give you some thoughts really about what you can do in phase 1 and then what you can do in phase 2, 3 and beyond. The first thing I think to say is that the mistake right now would be to think that donors don't want to hear from us. They do want to hear from us. At this time, more than ever, it's important for people to feel connected to the kinds of causes that they care about. And most people understand that right now there are people that are experiencing genuine and pretty horrible problems around the world, and they need more than ever the support that nonprofits are able to offer. So rather than communicate less, I think we have to keep up the level of communication that we send. And if it's appropriate for our organization, then we should be asking for money at this difficult time, because people will recognize that there's an emergency. Now, this is an example from the digital space. This is an email that's sent out. And I'm going to use this as an example because the wonderful thing about digital giving is that it's quite formulaic. And so over time, we begin to learn what works and what doesn't. And what I'm going to share with you is a simple formula that works to raise money right now through that channel. So this is an example of an emergency appeal. It's an example of an appeal which does amazingly well. 49.1% open rate, that's well above sector averages. Almost a 10% click-through rate, and people giving an average gift of $125, which in the States is massive. I mean, that's pretty much twice really what you would expect. And organizations that follow the formula to make digital work can, buy into an enhanced level of performance. So what's special about this email? Well, the first is that, they say that this is urgent. I don't normally send you emails like this, but these are desperate times. So I'm going to get straight to the point. This is an emergency. This is an emergency that we need to be dealing with now, and I need your help. And so the second point is describing how the situation is hurting beneficiaries. The coronavirus, in my example, is already forcing moms and kids to the edge of homelessness by devastating their income. So we're going to make it clear to the donor the impact that coronavirus is having on the beneficiaries that they care about. We're going to make clear too that this is a special gift. This is something we need you to do now, above and beyond what you might be doing for our organization. So will you please make an urgent gift of $33 to provide emergency housing assistance? And it's important to make that ask up front because we're all busy, we buzz through emails at a high rate. Many people are simply not going to read past that. So you need to get that urgency and that ask and that sense of emergency in early in that communication. You then need to tell a short story to illustrate the need, describing the need today. Here's what's going on. I just got off the phone from speaking with a worried mom named Angie. Angie waits tables and she's lost her job and she can't put food on the table. She needs your help. You also need to show how the gift fits the need exactly. So we're not going to use language like, will you partner with us? We're going to explain to the individual, your gift will help provide emergency housing. That's what your gift is going to achieve today. And the need is bigger than just this one person whose story I've been explaining to you. Just this week, I've already gotten more phone calls from worried moms like Angie. Their jobs are at risk, their kids are out of school, and so you go on. You also need to make clear that responding to this urgent need is simply not in your budget. None of us were expecting this. There are no funds in the budget to meet this unexpected need right now. But your gift today will provide instant relief and safety. And you need to make it clear that the donor needs to take an action now. Please make your gift now to provide this assistance. Your gift will help keep a mother and her children off the streets for a day, and every day counts right now. A few technical bits. You need to have a giving button front and central, at the bottom, at the top, and that needs to emphasize the urgent nature of the gift in the way that you can see in my example. You're making it clear in the headline that this is an emergency. It's related to the current crisis. And we're not writing vast amounts of words. The key to digital is it needs to be short and impactful. And it needs to be written for a child of 9 or 10 to be able to read. I'm not suggesting that we need to really simplify the work that we're doing, but the words that we use to talk to people need to be nice and simple. And you don't send this out once, you can send it out a few times, and you'll need to do that to get through the clutter that we're all experiencing right now. Each one of those points links to a section in the email, and you can take that away and read at your leisure. It's a formula that it is working well right now. So that's the emergency situation. I also wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you on thriving and surviving through phases 1, 2, and 3 of the impact on giving. So the first thing I'd say is we want to get the message right. And the key, the sweet spot in fundraising is talking about why what we do matters. Lots of organizations are very proud of what they do and how they do it. But frankly, the only people that care about that are government folks and maybe some folks at foundations who are interested in the methodology. Individual donors care about why that stuff matters. And it's in the why that they're going to feel the emotion, and it's in the emotion that's going to get them continuing to support the organization. And I was struck by this. This is the report that Pratyush mentioned a few minutes ago, that's recently been produced by ILSS. And I've just lifted a couple of quotes from there, because in a sense, nothing I'm talking about today is new. You know, there are organizations in India that are very well aware of these ideas right now, and they're acting on them. And it says here, no matter what conversations we have with people about fundraising, we should never lose sight of why. And why, we know from all kinds of research, is hugely important in getting people to give. Get the why right, and the rest of it really will follow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of examples of organizations that have really been phenomenally successful in fundraising. Talking about organizations that have doubled or tripled, or in some case, even quadrupled their fundraising income. And over the years, we've looked at the characteristics of those kinds of organizations to see what's special about them. NSPCC, the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Cruelty to children must stop, full stop. This is the core of their fundraising proposition. You'll notice they don't talk about programs, they don't talk about services, it's all about the why. Why? Cruelty to children must stop. This is Cancer Research UK. Together we'll beat cancer. Why do you give to Cancer Research UK? Well, frankly, because by doing that, together, we will beat cancer. And this is Save the Children, their campaign from a couple of years ago, No Child Born to Die. Why do you give to Save the Children? Because they believe that no child should be born to die. And if we can get them past age 6, we know that statistically they've got a massively bigger chance of survival. So we're going to focus on the early years because no child should be born to die. Now, what's interesting about all of those, you'll notice, is that they're all impossible, right? Somebody somewhere will always be abusing a child. Somebody somewhere will, in my lifetime certainly, be dying of cancer. The key thing to understand about fundraising is that it's the belief that's enough. You want that passion and that energy from individuals because they believe that's right. That's why we need to take action today. I'm going to share with you a couple of other examples. This is Macmillan. Macmillan take care of families that have just had somebody in that family be diagnosed with cancer. And you can imagine that being told that a loved one has cancer is a pretty horrendous life experience. Macmillan send nurses into the community to help people through that experience, to hold their hand as they deal with the early days of managing that condition and maybe hopefully working towards a cure. What's the why for Macmillan? Well, the why you give to them is that no one should face cancer alone. So you'll notice again, it's another why question. Their focus in their fundraising changed to that why around 2008. And you can see from this graph how exponentially their income has grown after making that transition. Save the Children, I showed you that a couple of seconds ago, No Child Born to Die. That too was introduced in about 2008. They invested in fundraising, so their income, net income, dropped a little over the subsequent year. And then after that, you can see exactly what happened to fundraising. It took off dramatically based on the why question. Here's an example of what not to do. This is Oxfam from a few years ago. Awful campaign. Everyone deserves life's little luxuries, you know, food, water, that kind of thing. Ooh, it's a very smug campaign. And worse, it tells you that malaria, dysentery, and apathy are 3 of the world's biggest killers. So they're just telling me that I'm the problem, right? Because I'm apathetic, I'm not giving to Oxfam, so that's a problem. And so too is the notion of humankind. What does it mean to be humankind? It's not a why, it's not even a what or a how. It's a very odd idea. And because it's lacking the why, you can see that when that was introduced in around 2006, their income tanked thereafter. Oxfam, of course, is a wonderful organization, fantastic fundraising. Now they're doing really great world-class fundraising. But this, I think, was not a great campaign for the reasons I've just described. Similarly, Action for Children. What was their proposition? Well, we're going to be there for as long as it takes. Somebody had done some maths and realized that they were working for families, taking action for children for about 2 years longer than other children's charities. And so somebody thought it would be a good idea to have a strapline that was about as long as it takes. No idea of a why, again, not even a what or a how, it's kind of a how long. Not good in fundraising. And you can see that when that was introduced in around 2008, that too tanked their income for the foreseeable future. So when Adrian talks about the why question in fundraising, he's talking about it for a reason, because it really does matter. And that's what we need to emphasize if we're raising money from individuals. I'd also say that the magic of that why needs to come from a very special place. If you want to achieve massive growth in fundraising, if you want to be one of these organizations that has doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled its income, we know from our research that you need to have a strong sense of organizational focus. Many nonprofits are rightly proud of all the work they do in the community, all the programs, all the services, and they feel the need to shout about all of those different things that they do. That's not the key to successful fundraising. The focus in fundraising is to choose something in the middle of this little hedgehog that you see here. You choose something that you can be really the best in class at doing. Something that you and only you can really do fantastically for those in need in the community. But you also need to do something that you and the whole organization loves to do, so that the whole organization can get behind that central message and live it and be proud of that fundraising message. And of course, you need to focus on something that donors will love and want to give to and feel passionately about too. And if you've got a program or a service or an idea or an aspiration that sits in the middle of that, that should really form the focus of the fundraising activity. And if you can get to the why of why that's important, that's the kind of message that you need to run with to really dramatically boost fundraising. So that's the first thing I'd say about managing fundraising in a crisis. It's about making sure that you put that central, powerful message forward and shave away all the bits that everybody else wants to talk about, right? The power is in focus. In many organizations that I work with, often you hear others in the organization say, yeah, but people need to understand that it's more complicated than that, and we need to do all these other things and all these other services that we do, people need to know about. No, they don't, right? Focus is the key for fundraising. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was caring for our donors. And taking time to realize that as this crisis unfolds and begins to impact our lives, that it will also be impacting the lives of our donors. And so one of the things that we might do as fundraisers is to take the time to care for our donors. This too is not a new idea. Here's another quote from the ILSS report. We shouldn't go to the donor only when we need money. We should go to them when we don't need money, and what we're interested in is building a relationship. And now, maybe more than ever, we could be concerned for how we make people feel. I think fundraising is pretty good right now at identifying need, packaging that need, crafting it into a decent case for support, and putting it out in front of people or organizations that might be motivated to give. That's where fundraising is. Where fundraising needs to be is thinking about how we're going to make people feel when we do that stuff to them. Now, because we're all human, even in a time of coronavirus, we still have what I would call higher order human needs. If you want to use plain English, what I'm talking about here is well-being needs. We all, if we're human, have a need to feel good. And what I'm going to highlight here are 3 core elements of human well-being that I think we could be addressing in fundraising. I know there are 6 on the list. I'm only going to talk about 3 that I think we can use in annual fundraising and that we could pay particular attention to right now. The first is the notion of connection. We feel good as human beings, and we feel like we're connected with others that we care about or that we love. And the stronger the sense of connection we experience, the better we feel right now. Now, in the context of giving to nonprofit organizations, you think, well, that's great, Adrian, because we can connect donors with beneficiaries. Yeah, we might. Or maybe it's not beneficiaries, it's one kind of beneficiary that I'm most interested in, that I need to be connected with. It might be that it's just connection with your fantastic organization because I really admire it and the work it's doing in the community, or the brand of the organization. Or maybe you've got a really fantastic, outstanding, charismatic leader at the helm of your organization that I want to feel as though I'm connected with because I've admired her for years and I think she's absolutely fantastic. Or it might be, if you're a faith-based organization, that it's a God figure of some kind that I want to feel connected with when I give to support your work. So we have to think a little bit about what people want to be connected with so we can give them that connection. People also feel good when they feel like they're good at doing stuff. In the context of philanthropy, that's feeling good at articulating their love for others. And we also feel good when we're able to make choices and have some control over making this good thing happen. Here's an example of how you can bring that knowledge to life. This is an appeal for the Royal British Legion, which is our servicemen and women's charity. It's an appeal to raise money. It happens to be a mail appeal, a direct mail appeal. But what's cute about this, if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that there's a piece of card there. And what you're looking at are both sides of that piece of card. On the one hand is the poppy, which is our symbol of remembrance. And on the other side, there's a space for you to write in a message of love to someone that you've lost or that you know that's been injured in a time of conflict. And you write your message and you send it in on the back of the card. Now, you don't have to make a donation, although of course many people do. You just simply send in your card. What happens to that card varies from one year to the next. This is the Mending Gate in Belgium, which was the site of some pretty ghastly carnage in World War I. And you can see that the poppies are planted there. This stuff is beautiful. And of course, your poppy with your message of love could be that one over there. This is beautiful. On the one hand, it has absolutely nothing to do with fundraising, right? On the other hand, it has everything to do with fundraising. Because my message of love could be that message of love right there. And of course, the organization is helping build connection between you and your loved one who is now part of that experience. It's beautiful, caring for donors. Here's another example, this time in a newsletter before and after a great chum of mine by the name of Tom Ahern got at it. On the left-hand side, it's a newsletter for Gillette Children's Hospital in Southern California. And the newsletter is all about how fantastic the hospital is, how great the surgeons are, how wonderful the nursing team is. At Gillette, medical pioneers set the standards for spine care. Will you give us $5? No, but I will give you a nice round of applause because clearly you're brilliant, right? On the right-hand side of the screen, by comparison, we've got a little thank you note to us from little Zawadi that you see there, the little Tanzanian girl. And if you look to the bottom right, you can see that this little girl was born with both her feet pointing in the wrong direction. This little girl could barely stand, much less walk. And thanks to you and your care and your generosity, this little girl can walk today. And if you look at the picture, you can see the beaming smile on this little girl's face. And you can see that in her hand, she has bags. And what's happened to this little girl today? Somebody has taken her shopping for the very first time in her life for shoes. And she's beaming from ear to ear. And you and your gift made that possible. Now, the difference between these two is the first is entirely corporate, right? It's all about them and how great they are and how wonderful they are. Well, newsletters sometimes bring in money, right? It's not usually designed to do that, but people send in checks. At Gillette, Medical Pioneers raised an amazing $4,500. The little thank you note to say thank you to you from Little Zawadi, $49,600. That's a 1,000% increase by attending to the human needs of the supporter, right? Saying thank you, making the donor feel competent at articulating their love for others, and bringing the donor together with the individual child that they're helping. The other thing I'd say in this time of conflict is that not everything we do needs to be about money. It can be simply about reaching out to our supporters. People around the world right now are in lockdown. They're being told what they can't do. They have to stay at home. They're disempowered. They're isolated. They're controlled. They're the very absence of those three things that I just talked about: connection and the ability to feel like you're making a difference. So we can use communications to make people feel good right now. Even if it's not raising us money right now, just simply reaching out to our supporters to help them through the crisis so that we can make them feel more powerful, more in control, more together, connected with others, and build their sense of well-being. I won't play you this video from the RNLI in the UK, but in essence, they're simply reaching out to supporters to say, thank you for your help in these recent times. We wanted you to know that we're thinking of you today. You're important to us. Please stay safe. Now, we've also been working with other organizations to send out simple surveys that are designed to make people feel good too. Asking them about how they feel, getting them to share how they feel right now, but also asking people to say a few words to what other people like them, who in this case support Greenpeace, what would you say to other Greenpeace supporters to encourage them right now, to make them feel more uplifted right now? And by filling in the questionnaire, people feel good. It went out, this particular survey, to about 1.5 million Greenpeace supporters. They got a 5.5% response rate, which is well above twice what they would normally get from surveys, and a big chunk of unsolicited communication from people saying how great it was that the organization took the time and trouble to care about them. This is the time to care for our supporters so that people feel better right now. They experience a higher level of well-being. Now, I'm going to leave you with one last thought. I've suggested that we care for donors, and so we attend to their higher order needs for well-being right now. The other thing that's going to make people feel good in this time of crisis is just feeling good about being the kind of person that they are. So if we can find a way to celebrate the well-being and get people to reflect on how good they feel because of their association with the organization and because of being the kind of person who they are, we can help them to feel better right now, but we can also raise more money. Here's an example of a response mechanism. This could be a piece of direct mail, but it could equally be a page that you have online when people are giving to the organization. And I'm going to draw your attention there to the two statements that you can see in purple. Yes, mending broken relationships connects me to God's heart. Yes, piercing together fractured lives is a vital part of what being a Christian means. Now, this happens to be a faith-based organization, but these lift questions that you see there, those two questions, are questions you can be inserting in your response mechanism or on your giving page. They'll do two things. They'll make people feel good. Yes, taking action to piece together fractured lives is a vital part of what being a Christian means to me. Now, piecing together fractured lives will have come from the appeal, the stories that's been told earlier on in this piece, either on the web page or on the piece of direct mail. So it's echoing something they will have just read, and it's tying that to my sense of who I am. In this case, it's using that Christian identity. So when I tick the box, I'm affirming that piecing together fractured lives is a vital part of who I am. Same kind of thing with mending broken relationships. Remember, I said people feel good when they're connected with others that they care about. That might be beneficiaries, it might be other people like them who care about children or the environment or whatever, but it can also be a God figure. And we're reminding people here that yes, mending broken relationships connects me to God's heart. And again, if that's what I believe, and the folk who receive this communication will believe that, they tick it, they reaffirm it, they feel great now about who they are. So we've done a service in that respect because we've attended to their well-being, but they'll also give more money. Now, this is a test that we set up to test the impact of that communication. And when you're doing a test, you have a control group where you don't do anything. So we won't have had either of those two lift questions in that response mechanism. And then we tested it with one question there, and we tested it with both questions there. What did we find? Well, in the control condition, the average response rate to this appeal letter that went out was about 1.5%. You'll see that if we talk to them about connection, we talk to them about their Christian identity, you can double the income coming into the organization. The response rate more than doubles. And we know, because we've done a lot of work on human well-being, that that's not an unusual set of results. If you care for your donors, and my goodness, right now we should be caring for our donors, that's a good thing in its own right, because we should be supporting others through the crisis, but it also will pump giving to our organization. And that is where I'm going to leave it and open up for some questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adrian. It was a wonderful presentation. And one of the first questions that trickled in, and I had the same question, is that what would be your advice to organizations whose donor base is more institutional in nature, maybe corporates, maybe foundations, and also probably for those organizations who are not working directly in relief? What would you say to those organizations when they talk to their donors for funding?
If I start with the last question, so I've used a couple of emergency examples very deliberately in my short presentation, but we've worked with arts organisations, we've worked with heritage organisations, we've worked with animal welfare organisations, whole spectrum. And the key thing in all of these things is to think about what people want to be connected with. In animal welfare, that might be the dog or the cat. If it's the NSPCC, it might be a child. Or in my last example, it might be a God figure. The way to use this in fundraising is to think about who people might want to be connected with through your organization. And it might be as simple as other people like them who care passionately about art or who care passionately about heritage. So you still attend to the same three factors. You make people feel empowered to make a difference to something that they care about. You make people feel as though they're competent in articulating their love for others when they give, and you give them that sense of connection. And you can do that with literally any category of cause. As far as institutional and organizational donors go, I think I showed from the Giving USA numbers that that's going to be hard right now. It's going to be hard if you're raising money from corporates because they'll be struggling to survive themselves. With foundations, the picture we know from learning from other countries can be a little different. By and large, foundations, I think it's fair to say, really do their best to step up. And what was striking about the 2007-8 crisis is just how much foundations tried to keep that level of money coming into the sector. So I think they really stepped up to the plate, and I'm sure they'll be making efforts to do that on this occasion. Clearly, when you're making a case to corporates and foundations, you have to talk more about the science and the statistics and the how you're going to tackle these issues. But I think you should still remember that the people that you're dealing with are still people. and we're not exempt from having those higher order needs. The people that you're talking to in the corporate will still need to feel connected with others that they care about. And it may be that as a component of the ask that you're putting together, you can offer that connection to some of the senior folk within that organization so that it helps to strengthen the case for support. So I think the answer to the question is that the same ideas are important. You just have to apply them differently to those different contexts.
Right, great. Thank you. Another question that we received when we were doing the registrations was, what is the pitch style that is more preferable? Would an anecdotal pitch style is a better pitch style, or a data-driven pitch style is a better pitch style? And what would you suggest?
Is this in presenting to a corporate, or to are you making the case to individuals?
Either of them.
Um,
Would it change with the donor?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because the stories, when you're raising money from individuals, will always work better than statistics. Talking to me about a child or a family, it makes it easy for me to feel something about the situation that family might be in. And because you're talking to me about that individual, it really empowers me to make me feel like I can make a difference. If you tell me about the 50,000 people impacted by the crisis, hundreds of thousands of people now without food, my $20 gift, it's hard to see how that could possibly make a difference to that level of need. So when you're talking to me as an individual, it makes sense to talk about a particular beneficiary, a particular family, a particular child, a particular whatever it is. I think for corporates and foundations, then you need to be bringing some of the statistics into play to demonstrate to them the wider impact that your gift is going to have. But even then, a couple of case studies can really bring that alive. And as I said a moment ago, we have to remember that the folk that we're talking to at that corporate are human. They are going to be moved by those stories. The statistics will help them make the case to the board for the investment that you're seeking. But to give them the impetus to do that, they're going to be able to do that because you've given them that human story too. So with individuals, emotion, individual stories is always going to be the best way to go. With corporates and foundations, yes, obviously you have to sprinkle in some of the science and stats too.
Right. There are a lot of, and there's care among social sector organizations, especially in India, that a lot of funds would be directed towards the COVID-19 relief. So there are questions about organizations who have planned fundraising events, and they're concerned about should they go ahead with those fundraising events, and how do organizations just generally respond to the funds getting diverted to COVID relief, and is there a way to hook the donors in these times?
Gosh, that's a very long. There's so many facets to that question that are fascinating. I think there's obviously a lot of concern around public gatherings right now. So mass fundraising events in most regions of the world have had to be cancelled. What we've seen more of is kind of a move to take some of those events online. Other organizations have responded by delaying the running of that event until later in the year. So there are two strategies that you can take there. A third one might be to have an ungala or an undinner or something where people come along and they'll give money because they're not going to the event. And I've seen quite a few non-profit organizations take that route. But of all the sources of income, I think that public fundraising is the one that's going to take the biggest hit right now. As far as other forms of fundraising go, digital can be a significant source of income for many organizations. I would be continuing to communicate with donors on a regular basis. I wouldn't be cutting back, and I would be, if it's possible for me, I would be having an emergency appeal to help get us through this crisis period, taking advantage of some of the advice that I put out earlier. And I've forgotten what the last part of your question was.
It was mostly about, is there a way to hook the donors who are keen?
Well, one of the things that we've seen quite a bit of around the world is getting people to put their hand up and say that they're interested in something. So rather than trying to, in the digital space, perhaps sign donors up to making a first gift to the organization, you find a way to get them to put their hand up and say, yes, I agree with that. That's really a significant issue. Maybe that's done through a survey platform where people can sign a petition or take part in a survey of some kind. And so by doing that, they are effectively putting their hand up and saying, yes, I really care about that. And then you follow up with the donor subsequently to ask them for a gift for that cause that they've just told you that they care about. And that sort of two-stage fundraising is something that's really taken off in many countries around the world. Simply because when you come to make the ask, you are putting that ask to people you know are interested. And typically from surveys or from petitions like that, you can get conversion rates into donating to the organization of 20 to 25%. There's a significant percentage of people that will convert.
That's a high conversion rate. The next question is from Ruchi, who is a young entrepreneur, and she has asked, what do you suggest should be the approach for young social entrepreneurs who are still building relationships and organizational building blocks? Also, what is absolutely necessary to stay afloat right now?
Another interesting question. I think the mistake to make is to not proceed as you would have done. I think I talked to a lot of organizations that are very nervous of asking for people for support right now. They're very nervous about reaching out to donors, given that they can't meet them face to face, and they have, they're worried about whether they could be talking to donors through Zoom or whatever. And the learning from the figures that are starting to emerge is that you can't afford to cut back. You have to keep plugging away at it, because donors realize that the need is there, and they're doing their best, like everybody else, to kind of get through the crisis right now. They're going to be pretty comfortable with using the technology to have conversations. They're going to be comfortable at making gifts to help people get through the crisis and to help improve society beyond it. We've simply got to continue to reach out and continue to ask. Cutting back is the very thing that I wouldn't be doing. And as far as building relationships goes, the stuff that I was talking about around well-being applies equally well to that context. If you're just at the process where you're beginning to cultivate relationships with high-value supporters, rather than thinking about how you can best make the case for your cause today, which is where most people are, you can be thinking about, who would this person most like to be connected with? Who in my network can I connect this person to that would make them feel really good, make them feel really special? Is this somebody they would really like to have that connection and conversation with? You can be thinking about, how can I create opportunities to make this person feel as though they've had a hand in making something good happen, or they can take meaningful choices that will help them to shape the nature of their intervention? And how can I begin to shape their sense of the fact that when they're going to help me or my organization get up and running, that is a good thing for them to be doing, and it's the right decision for them, and so enhancing that sense of competence. So those three things are not something that applies to direct mail or something that applies to digital fundraising. They're really the principles of how we begin to build relationships. Because when people feel good about themselves when they're around us, when they experience well-being when they're around us, it's much more likely that they'll continue to build that relationship and eventually to translate what you want to do into a program and to help you make it happen.
Right. Adrian, the retail fundraising market is not very huge in India right now, but it is slowly, gradually building up. And there are questions around the medium that organizations should use around on fundraising. Should they do retail fundraising on their own website, or should they use uh, crowdfunding platforms wherein a lot of people are expected to converge? And what helps convert donors on such crowdfunding platforms?
I think in general terms, you need to go where the people are. That's kind of something of a truism in fundraising. Over the years, we've had to learn and adapt to where people are congregating, and then to design strategies that will reach out to people when they're in those environments online. So I think reflecting on what that means, where your supporters are likely to be, and where they're going to be in a frame of mind where they're going to be interested in the kinds of things that you offer, and then you focus your media strategy, you focus your digital strategy on reaching out to them in that environment where they most feel comfortable. Retail fundraising, I think, is one of those things that if we do move online, if that's reasonably easy for an organization because it's not got a massive product range, I think giving people that opportunity to interact in the online space is another way in which they can show their support for you. And I would be doing all that I could, I think, to help that channel flourish. People are going to be purchasing a lot more of the stuff that they use in their daily lives in that online environment. And if we're not taking the step to move there during the crisis, I think we're going to suffer, not just because we didn't do it in the crisis, but because that online environment is going to be where people are going to be making a lot of their decisions for quite a long time to come. The lockdown, when it's released, is going to be released gradually, by which time people's purchasing habits will have begun to embrace the digital space much more so than they did historically. And it's not going to go back to the way it was. People are, for a very long time, I think, going to be using a lot more of those digital channels. So focusing effort in taking some of that retail operation there, I think, would be a good thing to do. The other thing I'd say is that I would be thanking donors who do that in exactly the same way as I would be thanking them for other forms of engagement, giving donations, advocacy, or doing whatever else they might do. We did some work with Goodwill Industries in North America, which is effectively a very large charity shop, and they had a frequent purchaser scheme, and they hadn't ever thanked people for being part of that frequent purchaser scheme. And one of the things that we learned is that when you do that, and you just take the time and trouble to thank people, I'll pretty much guarantee if you test it, thank a chunk of people, don't thank a chunk of people, the people who you thank will come back and buy from you more frequently, and they'll spend more money with you. Right. So treat them just as you would do your donors, and you'll find that they come back, they're much more loyal as a consequence.
Right. And a follow-up question on that, when you mentioned thanking the donors, donor loyalty programs is something that has come up again and again, and people say that donor loyalty gives return in a long run. So would you would you think that this is a good time to invest in donor loyalty programs?
This is why I think in my presentation I was talking about, let's think about what we can do for our donors, and it doesn't need to be an ask. It's simply use the time right now to find ways to build relationships with supporters. So in my Greenpeace example, Greenpeace in Spain sent out 1.5 million emails to their donors with a short little survey. Wasn't about giving money to the organization. It's just about finding out how well people are faring right now, how they're feeling, and giving them the opportunity to offer just a few words to other supporters like them to get them through the crisis. And those words of comfort, words of encouragement, then feature in a newsletter which goes out a few days later. All they're doing is caring for their donors. And you can guarantee that when you do that, people will stay with you for longer, they'll continue to support you, and they'll give to you in the longer term. It's it needs to be about building relationships right now and finding cute ways to do that, not simply just asking about money.
Right, right. One last question about the whole fundraising graph that you said, and there have been a couple of questions around that. Maybe after a 2 or 4 week peak, there would be a time when donations would come down. So, what would you suggest organizations to how would you suggest organizations to contact their donors in phase 2 of your graph, and also what can organizations do to again uh, increase their funding in the phase 3 of your graph?
Well, phase 1, I think we talked about. If you're an organisation that's providing services and those are under pressure right now, you keep asking, and you ask, you run with an emergency appeal to help you provide those vital services. Phase 2 is much more about that relationship building. So I'd be looking for ways in which people can engage meaningfully with the organisation. We talked about the Greenpeace survey I mentioned a few moments ago. Maybe you do a little quiz which you administer to donors about the cause, how they feel about things. Give people that little bit of engagement. Maybe you give them the opportunity to advocate, sign a petition, do something meaningful to engage with the cause that doesn't necessarily involve money. Because we're all at home, we're all under lockdown, we're all feeling isolated. All of the activities that I just mapped out, play against that. They begin to make people feel more connected. They make people feel more empowered. And if I feel really good about myself when I'm interacting with your organization, when I feel able to give again, I'm going to give to your organization because you helped me through that process. So yes, let's continue with appeals. Yes, let's continue with newsletters, but let's be thinking about other things that people can meaningfully do to help our organization and our cause, or simply to help them feel good about who they are right now. Not everything needs to be about us.
Right. Great. Thank you so much, Adrian. We're completely running out of time. This was an enlightening session, and we've received a lot of thank you messages in the chat box. So thank you again for joining us.
You're very welcome. And if folks would like a copy of the slides, they're very welcome to have a copy of the slides.
Yes, we will be sending the slides to the audiences. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.